Hello and a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 8th April 2026, brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be covering the 7 set of current affairs issues which are featured in today's newspaper. The handout of this very discussion has been pinned in the comment section below for your future reference. Beginning with the analysis section, in the first topic, we'll try and understand that why there was a need to carry out the caste census along with the ongoing census exercise, what are the challenges with respect to the same, and what steps India need to take in order to make sure that there is no discrepancy when it comes to the caste-related data. Moving on to the second topic, herein we'll try and understand the evolving dynamics of relation between India and Bangladesh. What are the areas of convergence? What are the emerging challenges between the two countries? And how India can restore its strategic ties with one of its most important states when it comes to South Asia. Moving on to the prelim pointers, herein we'll be covering the 5 set of current affairs issues in the most simple manner possible, and we'll also be doing the value addition which would be relevant for your upcoming prelims examination, so stay tuned. So now, beginning with the first topic, which is dealing with the issue of caste census. Now, we all know this particular thing, that along with the ongoing census exercise, the government took the decision that caste census would also be conducted. So in this particular backdrop, an RTI was fined, asking the government that what were the inputs and what was the discussion which took place based on which the government arrived at this particular decision that caste census should be carried out. But the union government, citing section 8, clause 1, subclause I of the RTI Act, stated that such information is outside the public domain. Okay, we are not allowed to disclose such particular information when it comes to the RTI Act. It stated that this is exempted from the ambit of the RTI Act. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 2 governance as well as GS paper 1 issues related to population. Now, the first thing that you need to know is what is the difference between census, caste census and caste survey. When it comes to census, it has a statutory backing. Why? Because it is carried out under Census Act of 1948, and it basically intends to collect the demographic, economic and social data of all the people who are there in the country at a specific period of time. And India may, on a regular basis, it is conducted at an interval of 10 years. And this particular census thing is a part of the union list. So, the state governments are not authorized to carry out the census, and that is the reason you will see that why the state go with caste survey and not with caste census, because census falls in the union list. Now, when it comes to the caste census, it basically involves collecting the individual's caste related details along with the census exercise that we are doing right now. It aims to gather the socio-economic status, educational details, other demographic details of various caste groups within the population. And does it have legal backing? The answer is no. It does not have the legal backing like what we have in case of census. The central government by notification may provide that caste identity related data would also be collected along with the ongoing census exercise. Every census in the independent India from 1951 to 2011 has published the data, caste related data when it comes to SC and ST caste, but no caste related data are collected when it comes to the other caste. Before that, till 1931, we collected the data, caste related data with respect to all the castes which are there in India. Okay, so this is the latest census data that we have when it comes to caste related details of all the caste when it comes to India. But the other census exercise which are conducted, therein you have the caste related details with respect to SC and ST, but you don't have details with respect to the OBCs and other caste categories. When it comes to socio-economic caste census data, which was carried out in 2011, that was done based on the recommendation of group of ministers who was headed by the then Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee. So the government took the decision in 2010, and based on that, this census was carried out, socio-economic caste census. However, the findings were never made public, okay? Not all the findings were made public because there was huge discrepancy when it comes to the data that was collected. When it comes to caste survey, we studied right now that when it comes to census, it falls in the union list. That is why the states cannot carry out a caste census. That is why they went with caste survey. And this is something that you see in state of Bihar, Karnataka and Telangana. So state governments in Bihar, Karnataka and Telangana, they have carried out their respective state caste survey. And you need to make note of another thing on which a prelims question might be asked, that caste survey do not have legal backing. So out of the three, that is census, caste census and caste survey, the only which is having the legal backing, that is your census. Now, let's come to the debate that why we took the decision to carry out the caste census. The last census, that is of 1931, wherein we have the caste related details of all the caste. That is the latest data that we have. And that is the reason, in order to know that what all developments we have made when it comes to educational attainment, when it comes to health indicators, when it comes to socio-economic indicators with respect to different caste and their subcaste, we need data for evidence-based policy making. Because based on that, we can fix our priorities when it comes to implementing the welfare programs. For example, if I know that this particular caste A, therein the people are not performing well when it comes to socio-economic indicators. So when I'm making a policy which is trying to do away with the poverty, so I'll be focusing majorly upon this caste A. That is what evidence-based policy making means. Otherwise, you will be going with one-size-fits-all approach. You don't have the data, you will not be able to go with a targeted approach. And it would become difficult for us to realize the idea of inclusive growth also. Then, if you have the data on a regular basis that what is the development that a particular caste is making when it comes to socio-economic indicators, when it comes to educational attainment, when it comes to health indicators, based on that, we can also set the criteria for reservation in the education as well as the employment thing. And based on the data that you will be collecting under the caste census, based on that, the government can rationalize the reservation quota for different caste as well as the subcaste, because there are certain castes which are not able to get the benefit of affirmative actions, like for example denotified, nomadic and semi-nomadic tribes, and there are certain caste, certain sub-caste I would say of a particular major caste which are taking away all the reservation benefits. So we need the data on a regular basis so that we can rationalize the reservation policy as well. And at the same time, you all would be interested to know this thing, that whether the reservation actually have some positive correlation with the socio-economic indicators or not. For that, you need to carry out the caste census on a regular basis. Then, this is also in direction with the sub-categorization, especially of the OBC caste. And this was something which the Rohini Commission has also recommended, and it is the commission which has been set up to do the sub-categorization of the OBC caste, so that we can make sure that the reservation benefits which are given to the OBC caste in total are not taken away by only minuscule of the subcaste which are there under the OBC. The reservation benefits should be more targeted, and based on the caste census data only, you will be able to rationalize the reservation quotas, okay, when it comes to different subcaste under the OBC category. Then it would help us do better targeting of the welfare schemes. What do I mean by better targeting? Here I basically talk about the tailor-made approach that we can go with if you have the requisite data at your disposal. For example, I told you that we will be collecting data with respect to socio-economic indicators, with respect to health attainment, with respect to health related indicators. Okay. Now, if I get to know that there is caste A and there is caste B, this caste A is not performing good when it comes to educational attainment, and this caste B, people belonging to caste B, they are not performing well when it comes to health related indicators. So when I'll be making health related policy, I'll prioritize this caste, and where I'll be making education related policy, I'll be prioritizing this caste. Basically, you will be giving more benefits to this caste A when it comes to educational related policy, and when it comes to health related policy, your major focus would be members of caste B. That is what we mean by tailored made approach when it comes to the policy making. And this is something which you can validate based on the Bihar caste survey. The Bihar caste survey rightly pointed out that currently approximately 83% of the population is covered under the National Food Security Act. But the survey points out that 22 million people who should be getting the benefits of this Food Security Act, they should be provided with subsidized food, they are not getting the benefit. 22 million people in a single state. Imagine the number at the national level. That is another reason you need to carry out the caste census on a regular basis. And lastly, this is also in alignment with the constitutional mandate under Article 340, which tells the government that on a regular basis, a commission needs to be set up to study the condition, to investigate the socio-economic condition of socially and educationally backward classes. So this caste census would be in alignment with this Article 340. And this would also help us to understand the relative deprivation among different subcaste, and based on that, the government would be able to plan its targeted approach. This would enable us to realize the idea of inclusive growth as well as upholding the idea of social justice. Now, having understood the benefits, what are the challenges associated with caste census? First and the foremost challenge that you will be witnessing is caste-based political mobilization. Now, when it comes to India, we are trying to weaken this notion of caste. But if you're collecting caste-related, identity-related data, don't you think so it is going to rather strengthen the caste-related identities in India? And political parties would be using this particular data for their vote bank politics. If let's suppose from the data you get to know that people of caste A, they are not, performing well when it comes to the socio-economic indicators, educational indicators, health indicators, then even if currently they are not covered under the reservation ambit, they'll start demanding that. The OBC category, which is already getting the reservation benefits, they get to know that, okay, they have higher numbers, so they'll start demanding more reservation benefits, and ultimately you will be breaching the reservation limit, ceiling limit, that is 50%. And once you breach that, you are going to compromise upon the administrative efficiency. Okay, so that's the problem. Then it is going to harden the caste identity, and it would make it very difficult to move in the direction of national integration, because for national integration you need to weaken the caste identity, but by doing this caste census you are actually strengthening these particular identities. It might open Pandora box, because different caste groups, once the data would be there in the public domain, they'll start demanding more and more reservation benefits, and the caste which are currently not considered under reservation benefits, okay, who are not getting any reservation benefits, they might enter into competitive backwardness, that we are the backward class, we need the benefits. And that is going to open the Pandora box. One or the other caste group, and by getting the support from the political parties, everyone would start demanding that we need reservation benefits. What about equity? What about administrative efficiency? So just based on the caste, you can't put the administrative efficiency at stake. Then, based on administrative and logistic challenges also, previously in 2010, Registrar General of India refuted this particular idea to go with the caste census. And another problem is, when it comes to the caste identities in India, you might be having different names of the same caste in different state. A particular caste might be considered as a backward class in one state and might not be considered as a backward class in case of another state. That is the classic case when it comes to Jats. They are not considered OBC when it comes to Haryana, but they are getting the reservation benefits when it comes to the state of UP. So there is huge discrepancy when it comes to the caste related details. And because of these discrepancies only when it comes to collection of the caste related identities data under the socio-economic caste census, that was the reason why majority of the data that we collected under the socio-economic caste census was not released in the public domain. Then there is lack of uniform definition. Same caste is spelled in different way in different states, and one caste might be extremely backward in one state and can be backward in other state. How do you ensure that there are no errors when we are collecting the caste related details? And another problem that might be the case is when it comes to the officials who are going to the ground and collecting the data when it comes to the caste identity. What happens if they don't deal with this particular thing with utmost sensitivity? That could lead to breach of trust when it comes to the people. And another concern is the privacy concern. How do you ensure that such data is preserved? It would not be used for further marginalization of certain caste, because various reports point out that Aadhaar data of more than 80 crore people are already there on the darknet. How do you ensure that the caste related data that you're collecting under the caste census would be preserved? How do you ensure the privacy of so many Indians, which is at stake? Now, the last thing that we need to understand is how do you strike a balance? Because at the one end, we need data to move in the direction of evidence-based policy making. Because as the Sachar committee, which collected the data with respect to Muslim community, it looked into the relative deprivation of Muslim community. It clearly pointed out that data do help us to move in the direction of evidence-based policy making. So it's a valid fact that you need data to go with a targeted approach, to go with the tailor-made approach. But how at the same time you make sure that the caste data would not be used for political motives and it would rather be used for the targeted welfare approaches. For that, you need to first standardize the classification of the caste. We need to come up with the National Directory of Caste. So the Registrar General of India, the Census Commissioner, they need to take help of the anthropologist, the sociology experts, and we need to draw down upon the existing caste categorization that we already have, as a result of the socio-economic caste census. So we should draw upon that, we should take the help of the experts in this domain, and we should come up with the National Directory of Caste so that we can avoid the discrepancy when it comes to collecting the data. Then you need to provide comprehensive training when it comes to the officials who are going to collect the caste related details on the ground. They need to deal with the situation very sensitively. They need to make the people aware that why this data is being collected. And they should be allowed to use the new emerging tools so that there are less chances of errors. And these tools should be trained based on the National Directory of Caste. So you need to prepare this, and then based on that you need to train these tools so that we can avoid the discrepancy as and when you continue this caste census on a regular basis. This year when you will be carrying out caste census, there would be certain discrepancy, but we need to learn from that. Then to ensure data accuracy and reliability, there needs to be multiple verifications by using different data sets that you have. You should cross-verify the data at multiple levels. You need to take the participation of the community and you need to make them sensitized that why this data is being collected. It is not to be used for further marginalization of that particular caste. Rather, it would be used for coming up with a tailor-made welfare approach. Then you need to ensure that adequate data protection laws are in place, and the government need to assure to the people that yes, their data would be protected at any cost. And we need to ensure fair uses of this data. So this data should not be used for vote bank politics. Rather, it should be used by the government to come up with a tailor-made approach when it comes to realizing the idea of inclusive growth. That's it with respect to this particular topic. So based on the discussion that we have, you will be in a very comfortable position to deal with this particular mains question. With this, let's move on to the next topic. The second topic is dealing with India-Bangladesh relationship. What is the backdrop? Recently, the Bangladesh foreign minister has landed India yesterday itself. So in this particular backdrop, we'll try and understand the evolving dynamics of the relationship between India and Bangladesh. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 2, India and its neighborhood relations. Now, the first thing that you need to understand, especially from the IR point of view, that why a particular nation is crucial for India. So we'll try to understand that why Bangladesh is significant for India. First and foremost, you must have read this in your geography textbook also, that when it comes to sharing the international border, the largest border that India shares with any country, that is Bangladesh. And with Bangladesh, we share around 50 plus transboundary rivers. And Bangladesh provides the shortest land as well as port access and establish India's mainland connectivity with the northeast India. So it is very important from regional connectivity point of view as well as it is important from geostrategic point of view as well. Then it is an important crucial trade partner as well. When it comes to Bangladesh, it is India's biggest trade partner in South Asia, and when it comes to India, it is the second biggest trade partner of Bangladesh in Asia. Bilateral trade stands more than 14 billion in 2023-24, and it is vital that India strengthen its trade ties with Bangladesh if it wants to realize the idea of $5 trillion economy. Then when you talk about security and border management also, during the time of Sheikh Hasina, that was considered to be as the golden chapter when it comes to India-Bangladesh relations. At that time, Sheikh Hasina actually helped us dismantle the anti-India terror groups which were functioning in the state of Bangladesh. And the BSF as well as Bangladesh Border Guard, they coordinated with each other, and that has helped us to reduce the cross-border crimes. Then the two countries carry out joint exercises also, that is Sampriti as well as Bongo Sagar. And in 2015, we successfully signed the land boundary agreement and we settled the disputed lands. And this was again done during the tenure of Sheikh Hasina, which was the golden chapter when it comes to India-Bangladesh relations. The two countries also share international forums at BIMSTEC, SAARC, BBIN, that is Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, and Indian Ocean Rim Association. The two countries have signed various connectivity projects, for example, Akhora-Agartala rail link, as you can see in this picture also. And here in the first train would be running from the northeastern region to Bangladesh. Then we have Khulna Mongla port rail line. Then we have Maitri Setu over the Feni river. Agreement on uses of Chittagong and Mongla port. All these connectivity projects are going to further strengthen India's and Bangladesh economic as well as trade ties. Then we also cooperate when it comes to river management also. We have the Ganga Water Treaty in 1996, based on which there is sharing of data when it comes to the flow of Ganga river. And there are joint rivers commissions also, wherein the data is shared when it comes to the flow of the river. And the two countries also collaborate when it comes to flood management, irrigation, data sharing, and cooperation continues across 54 rivers except Tista. Then Bangladesh is also important from the medical point of view. Why? Because Bangladesh accounts for 35% of India's medical tourists. And this is possible because of the India providing medical visa facilitation. There is collaboration between the hospitals and telemedicine services, which is on a rise when it comes to India. We have great cultural as well as people-to-people ties also. We have Indira Gandhi Cultural Center here in India, and we have Indian Cultural Center in Dhaka. And on a constant basis, there are cultural exchanges between the two countries. Now, the second thing that you need to understand is how the relation between India and Bangladesh has taken a flip. Okay, especially after the ouster of Sheikh Hasina and after this BNP party has come into power when it comes to Bangladesh. So, after the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, which was considered to be at the golden chapter when it comes to India-Bangladesh relationship, from that time, there are tensions when it comes to India-Bangladesh relations, especially when the interim government, which was headed by Muhammad Yunus, who made a very controversial statement when it comes to India's northeastern region. He described India's northeastern region as a landlocked region, and it actually invited China to improve its ties with the northeastern India by using the Bangladesh ports. It is like hijacking the northeastern India by using the Bangladesh ports. And that was the reason which led to, certain tensions between India and Bangladesh relations. Then, after the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, constantly we are seeing the attack on the minorities. You see, Dipu Das, there was a Hindu man who was living in Bangladesh, he was attacked. And this was something which was highlighted by the activist also, that over 1,000 Hindus have been attacked in the state of Bangladesh. So this is deteriorating the condition between the two countries. Then, geopolitical balancing. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which has got the power after the recent elections, it is more tilted towards China. And it is also trying to, strengthen its relation with Pakistan, which ultimately goes against the India's security concerns. And it is likely that China would be increasing its foothold in one of a strategic South Asia country, which is important for India from the security point of view. Then, because of deteriorating security, condition in the state of Bangladesh, the Indian government halted various connectivity projects because of the security fears, and this include Akhara-Agartala cross-border rail link, Khulna-Mongla port line, Dhaka-Tongi, Joydebar expansion, and various survey that we were carrying out when it comes to coming up with, upcoming connectivity projects, that was also halted. Then, currently we are seeing an India out sentiment because the current government is more tilted towards China and it is, more oriented towards strengthening its relation with Pakistan. And that is the reason this India out sentiment is on a rise. This was not the case when the Sheikh Hasina was in power. And keeping in light the deteriorating, relation and this controversial remark made by Muhammad Yunus, India stopped its transshipment facility which it used to earlier provide the Bangladesh. Okay, so it has revoked Bangladesh right to ship exports through Indian ports, and India has given the reason that it is leading to congestion, and this is negatively impacting the export competitiveness of India itself. Then this new government which has come into power, that is BNP, it is also constantly making the demand to extradite Sheikh Hasina, and this has put India in a very diplomatic discomfort position because as we all know that Sheikh Hasina tenure was the golden chapter when it comes to India-Bangladesh relations. Okay, so this has put India in a very discomforting position. Now, what all steps India need to take in order to restore its ties when it comes to a crucial player in South Asia, that is Bangladesh? So first and foremost, India needs to de-hyphenize its relation with the political party in power. We should not be going with Awami League only. That means our relation with Bangladesh should not be dependent only upon the political party in power. Rather, we should go for people-to-people connect. This we can do by easing the visa regimes for medical tourism, education, and we can strengthen the soft power bridge. So, our relation with Bangladesh should not be dependent upon political party in power. Rather, it should be about strengthening the people-to-people connections. And we need to do away with the anti-India sentiment which is on a rise after the BNP has come into picture in the state of Bangladesh. For this, you need to restore the public goodwill that India used to enjoy early in the state of Bangladesh. Then, we need to ensure high-level visits, especially by the Prime Minister of India. This could help us confer international legitimacy to the new regime, and it might restore the relation between the two countries. Then, we can use the economic interdependence as a stabilizing tool to ensure cooperative behavior from the state of Bangladesh. We all know this particular fact that if you are economically dependent upon any person, you cannot be enemy. You cannot you cannot go against that particular person. The same thing is applicable in international domain as well. If you are dependent upon a particular country, you cannot go against the interest of that particular country, and that is something we can use with the state of Bangladesh. So experts point out that we should further strengthen our economic and trade ties with the state of Bangladesh, and we should help Bangladesh revive its economy. Okay, after the Sheikh Hasina ouster, the economy should be brought back on track, and we should increase Bangladesh economic interdependence on India, and this we can use to make sure that Bangladesh does nothing which go against India's own self-interest or strategic interest. So we can ensure cooperative behavior from Bangladesh by increasing Bangladesh economic interdependence on India. Then, as in 2026, Bangladesh is going to graduate from least developed country status to becoming a developing country. So that simply means that you will be losing the duty-free access to Western markets. So in this particular backdrop, experts point out that we should further strengthen our relation with the state of Bangladesh. For this, you need to fast-track the SEPA agreement, wherein you don't just lower down the trade barriers when it comes to goods and services, but you also collaborate when it comes to investment, when it comes to IPRs, when it comes to mutual recognition agreements. That means Bangladesh degree would be valid here, Indian degree would be valid in Bangladesh. And when it comes to Bangladesh, India should clearly establish the red lines. We should clearly communicate that what are the things on which India is not going to compromise. And if you do this particular act, you are going to lose one of your important trade partner. That is protection of the minority. So if there are atrocities against the Hindus in Bangladesh or any minority in the state of Bangladesh, then it is going to have a negative impact on India-Bangladesh relations. So this is non-negotiable for us. And the similar thing should be clearly communicated to the state of Bangladesh when it comes to Chinese development. So there should not be any dual use facility, that you are allowing the port to be used for military purposes by the China, because that goes clearly against the India's security interest. So this is also a non-negotiable thing for us that should be clearly communicated. And at the end of the day, you need to strengthen the diplomatic ties as well as people-to-people ties. Now, based on the discussion that we have, I know that you will be fairly able to deal with this particular mains question. With this, let's move on to the prelim pointer segment. Beginning with the prelim pointer segment, the first article is dealing with India's 3-stage nuclear power program. And you will be happy to know this, that India has made some advancement when it comes to the second stage of this particular nuclear power program. And in this respect, the great news is Kalpakkam fast breeder reactor has attained criticality. So what is this 3-stage nuclear power program? Let's understand. This particular topic is relevant from the science and tech portion of your prelim syllabus. Now, this 3-stage nuclear power program was formulated by Homi Bhabha in 1950s. Why? With the intent to ensure long-term energy security when it comes to India. And why do we have this 3-stage nuclear power program? Wherein the first stage is basically a pressurized heavy water reactor. Second stage is the fast breeders. Okay, that is Kalpakkam, wherein we have attained criticality, and the last stage would be thorium-based nuclear reactors. Why we cannot directly jump onto thorium-based nuclear reactors? Because India already have one of the largest shares globally when it comes to thorium reserves. And these thorium reserves are amply available in the coastal states of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra and Gujarat. And they are also found in the inland riverine sands of Jharkhand as well as West Bengal. So why can't we directly jump onto this third stage? Let's understand this. So in the first stage, what we are going to do? We are going to use the natural uranium as a fuel. So natural uranium only and only have 0.7% of the fissile isotope of uranium, that is uranium 235. Whereas 99.3% of this natural uranium actually consists of the non-fissile uranium isotope, that is uranium 238. Okay, so what we are going to do in this? We are going to use natural uranium as a fuel under the pressurized heavy water reactor to produce electricity, and it would also generate plutonium 239 isotope as a byproduct, which is a fissile isotope of plutonium. Okay, and here you will be using heavy water, that is deuterium oxide, as the coolant or the moderator. So in the first stage, what you get? You use natural uranium and you get fissile plutonium isotope, that is plutonium 239. So in the second stage, which is the fast breeder reactor, what you are going to use? You are going to use the same plutonium 239 fissile isotope recovered from the first stage, and you will again use natural uranium. Why? Because we know that out of the entire natural uranium that you have, you only have 0.7% of the fissile material. So you anyways have to use the natural uranium because we have very limited quality of this fissile isotope of uranium. So what we are going to do in the second stage? So under the second stage, you are going to use this plutonium fissile isotope of 239, and we'll be using again natural uranium. So this plutonium fissile isotope of 239, it would undergo fission to produce energy, while the uranium 238 would undergo transmutation to produce additional fissile plutonium isotope, that is 239. What is this transmutation? Wherein an isotope would be changing its chemical properties and the number of protons and neutrons would undergo a change. Why should uranium 238 be transmuted to plutonium 239? Because 238 is not a fissile isotope, okay, and 235 and plutonium 239 are the one which can sustain a chain reaction. It is not this uranium isotope of 238 which can continue this chain reaction. You need the fissile isotope of uranium, that is uranium 235, and you also need the fissile isotope of plutonium, that is 239, to carry out this chain reaction. And once this self-sustaining chain reaction, fission reaction continues, that is what is referred to be as criticality, and that is what we have attained at the Kalpakkam fast breeder reactor. Okay, and why it is being used, I have already told you, because in the natural uranium, you only have very limited quality of the fissile uranium isotope. Now, once the inventory of this is collected, fissile isotope of plutonium, that is 239, is built up, then you can use thorium. We have one of the largest reserves of thorium. So you cannot directly use thorium. You need to first collect this plutonium fissile isotope, that is plutonium 239, and then you can use thorium as a blanket material, and this would again get transmuted into uranium 233, again a fissile isotope of uranium. So now you can continue this self-sustaining series of fission reaction in the third stage of thorium based reactors, and here you can directly use the naturally occurring thorium. Okay, once you have got this thorium 232 and one of the fissile isotope of uranium, that is 233, and they together would continue the self-sustaining fission reaction. Let me just summarize why we have break it down into three stages. First, India has huge reserves of thorium, and thorium itself is not a fissile material. That is the reason you cannot begin with directly with the third stage. You need adequate inventory of the fissile plutonium 239, okay, which would then be mixed with this thorium, and then you will be getting this uranium fissile isotope of 233. Then the naturally occurring thorium and this uranium 233 isotope, they'll be together continuing the self-sustaining fission reaction. Okay, it cannot undergo fission to produce energy when it comes to naturally occurring thorium. So it needs to be transmuted to uranium 233 in a reactor, which would be fueled by other fissile material, that is plutonium 239 and uranium 235. Okay, that is why we have break it down into three stages. That is the reason you cannot directly use thorium. Now, when it comes to the Kalpakkam fast breeder reactor, it is India's second stage, because fast breeder reactor was the second stage when it comes to the 3-stage nuclear power program. And the good news is we have attained criticality here, and this fast breeder reactor is located in Tamil Nadu. Criticality means that it is able to carry out the self-sustaining nuclear fission reaction. Fission is when one particle breaks down into two. And each fission event in the core now releases a sufficient number of neutrons to sustain an ongoing series of reaction. And why it is known as fast breeder? Because it uses less fuel rather than what it actually produces. Okay, so it initially used uranium plutonium mixed oxide as a fuel with a blanket of uranium isotope of 238, which is the major isotope in the naturally occurring uranium. And this isotope would undergo transmutation. What is nuclear transmutation? I've already discussed with you that how it involves conversion of a chemical element or isotope into another chemical element with the numbers of protons and neutrons undergoing a chain. And since it produces more fuel than what it actually uses, that is why it is known as fast breeders. And what is the relevance if we are able to, operationalize this Kalpakkam fast breeder reactor? The relevance is India would become the second country after Russia to have commercially operating fast breeder reactors. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, Supreme Court has begun reviewing its Sabarimala judgment. In this particular backdrop, it becomes important for us to understand what is doctrine of essentiality and what are the concerns raised by various experts as well as the government with respect to this particular doctrine. This particular topic you can relate with the polity section of your prelim syllabus. So, this particular doctrine is not something which is provided in the Indian Constitution. Rather, it was invented by a 7-judge bench of the Supreme Court in Shirur Mut case of 1954. And in this particular case, the Supreme Court clearly stated that the word religion will cover all the rituals and the practices which are integral to a religion, and it took the responsibility upon itself that we are the one who is going to decide that which religious practice or ritual is an essential or a non-essential element of that particular religion. We are going to decide that whether this ritual or a practice is something, a defining characteristic of that particular religion or not. And on what basis it is going to decide the essentiality. So in some cases, it went with what the religious texts are saying with respect to that particular practice. In some cases, it went with the empirical behavior of the followers of that particular sect or that particular religion. And in some cases, it looked into this particular fact that whether the practice existed at the time when the religion originated or it was a practice which evolved at a later date. So in various cases, it has, used these determinants to determine whether a particular religious practice or a ritual is an essential feature of that particular religion or not. Now, when this doctrine would be coming into picture, we all know that the fundamental rights chapter, we have article 25 to 28, which gives you the freedom of religion. But the freedom of religion can be subjected to reasonable restrictions. And whenever your right to practice religion would be coming in conflict with the FRs, other fundamental rights, then this doctrine of essentiality would be coming into picture. Now, if you go by Article 26 of the Indian Constitution, it says that your right to manage religious affairs is subject to certain reasonable restrictions, that is public order, morality as well as health. So on these grounds, the court do have the power to look into this particular fact that whether a particular religion, practice, ritual is an essential feature of that particular religion or not. But in this particular backdrop, the experts have pointed to various concerns. First is the inconsistency of the factors based on which the court is deciding that whether that practice is essential or not. I told you, in some cases it looked into the religious text. In some cases, it looked into this particular fact that whether this practice was there when the religion came into picture or not, or it evolved at a later date. So in different cases, different stand has been taken. Now, when it comes to the Sabarimala judgment itself, the government had and the various experts have pointed out that how could the court examine the essentiality of the religious practice of a denomination that does not otherwise offend the public order, morality as well as health, because preventing the entry of menstruating women in the Sabarimala temple was not going against any of these reasonable restrictions. That is why the experts raised this particular question. Then another question is, how can judiciary look into the religious text? Because that is something which can be decoded effectively by the religious scholars, and this is not something which the court can do effectively. Then the government has raised concern, it has given an argument that whether judges actually have the expertise to decide if a ritual of a particular religion is mere a superstition or an essential religious practice. Does the judges do have this much of expertise? And the interpretation of religious texts, again, this is to be examined by the religious scholars, and it is very impossible for the court to do the same. And in the Sabrimala judgment, it upheld the right of the woman of menstruating age to enter into the Sabrimala temple. But when it comes to the Sabrimala temple, the ancient custom is that such menstruating women are not allowed to enter into the Sabrimala temple wherein you have the deity Lord Ayyappa. The question is, can the attribute of a deity be judicially reviewed? All these questions would be looked into this, when the Supreme Court is going to review its Sabrimala judgment, which it is doing currently. Some of the famous cases which the Supreme Court has given by using this doctrine of essentiality. One is of 2004, wherein the court applied the test of essential religious practice in deciding whether the Tandava dance is actually an essential practice of the Ananda Marga faith or not. And the court observed that in order to determine whether or not a particular practice is an essential part of a religion, the test must be whether the absence of that practice itself fundamentally alters the religion or not. Then in Sharabano case, we all know that the court declared triple talaq as unconstitutional, stating this thing that triple talaq is only one form of talaq which is permissible in law, but at the same time stated to be sinful by very Hanafi school which tolerates it. And it also pointed out that a practice that is merely permitted, not prohibited by a religion, cannot be considered as essential or a positive tenet when it comes to that particular religion. So these are some of the landmark judgments, and the another one is your Sabrimala judgment as well. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, the Artemis II mission is again in news after its launch. It has went far away from the Earth and it has set a new record altogether. That is the reason this is again in news, and this is relevant from a science and tech portion of our prelim syllabus. Let's just first understand what is this Artemis mission. So it is going to be a lunar mission which is of NASA, and for this NASA has collaborated with other 3 space agencies of European Space Agency, then Japan as well as Canadian Space Agencies. And it is going to have 4 missions, first, second, third and fourth. And the mission is basically a part of NASA's vision to develop its moon base. So when it comes to the space Artemis first mission, it was an uncrewed flight test of the Orion spacecraft and the Space Launch System rocket to basically check that whether they are functioning very well or not. When it comes to Orion spacecraft, it is a reusable crude spacecraft which is used in NASA's Artemis mission, and that has been used in Artemis second mission also. And it probably would be used if everything goes out well in third mission also. Then we have the Space Launch System rocket, which is a super heavy lift expandable launch vehicle developed by NASA. Expandable launch vehicle basically means it can be launched only once, and once it would re-enter again in the Earth atmosphere, it needs to be discarded. Now, when it comes to this Artemis second mission, it would be a crewed mission, okay? You will have astronauts, and it is not a landing mission. It does not intend to land on the moon. It is just a flyby test. So the main aim of this particular second mission is to check that whether the Orion spacecraft and the European service model, are they able to safely sustain human life in the deep space or not. And it also intends to bridge the gap between Artemis first mission and the Artemis third mission. Because in Artemis third mission, NASA is planning to actually land on the lunar surface, okay, by 2028. And this second mission is also important because it also carry 1 woman astronaut as well as 1 non-white astronaut as well. Now, why it is again making the headlines? Because it has set a new record altogether. It has went far away from the Earth. The last record was set by Apollo 13 in 1970. And we have studied this thing that it is not a landing mission. It is just to test the limits of the Orion spacecraft. And when it comes to the earlier missions like Apollo 8, they followed a circular lunar orbit. That means they maintain a fixed distance from the lunar surface like this. Okay, fixed distance every side. But when it comes to the Orion spacecraft and this Artemis II missions, they are going to follow an elliptical free return trajectory. So this is going to rely on the moon's gravity to naturally slingshot the spacecraft back towards the Earth. How is this free return trajectory is going to work? So first phase of this free return trajectory is the high Earth orbit, wherein the spacecraft would remain in the high Earth orbit, okay, which stretch around 74,000 kilometer for 42-hour window, just to test that whether the Orion spacecraft is performing well or not. And if they found that anything is going wrong, they will go back to the Earth within hours. Okay, so that is why they are not aiming directly for the moon, rather they'll stay in the high Earth orbit, which is around this altitude high, and for 42-hour window they'll stay there just to check that whether the Orion spacecraft is able to support life or not, and if anything goes wrong, we'll not put the astronaut life at stake. Another phase is lunar slingshot. So once it is cleared that okay, Orion spacecraft and everything is working well, it is able to support life and the astronaut's life is not at stake, so then they'll move towards the moon. Okay, once it is cleared for the deep space, Orion spacecraft would be pushed towards the moon, and it would be done by the European service model. Okay, by the European service model, the Orion spacecraft would be pushed towards the moon, and then we'll be using the moon's gravity to act as a tether, catching the spacecraft, and again it would bring it back towards the Earth like this. Once it would fly by, again by using this, it would be again brought to the Earth. Now, why this mission is very interesting? First and foremost, it is using this figure 8 route like this, as you can see. It is not following a circular path, because if you follow a circular path, you need more fuel. Once to get into the gravity of moon and once to leave the gravity of the moon. So since this mission is not following a circular path, it is following an 8-figure elliptical path, that is why the fuel requirement is very less, and that is the reason the lighter fuel requirement reduces the overall mass that the Space Launch System rocket has to lift off the pad. Okay, and hence it is helping us to save a lot of fuel also. That is another reason why this mission is very interesting. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. In the backdrop of West Asian crisis, India, for the last 6 years, it is for the first time that we are going to get the highest level of Venezuelan crude oil. Okay, it is for the first time that in the last 6 years we have purchased this much huge amount of the Venezuelan crude oil. Okay, around 10 to 12 million barrels we have purchased. This is something related to the economy part of your prelim syllabus. Now, when it comes to India, we all know that more than 80% of our crude oil demand is metro imports. And 40% of that used to come from West Asia. But since Strait of Hormuz is blocked, West Asian crisis is still continuing. That is the reason, to ensure adequate stock of the crude oil, petroleum, diesel and all, we have purchased this much huge volume of crude oil from Venezuela. And this West Asian crisis has told us that why it is important to ensure diversification when it comes to your supply chains. Okay, so earlier US has captured the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro, and then Washington, that is US, took control of the Venezuelan oil sector. But it's authorized the Venezuelan global oil companies to export the crude oil, and that is the reason India started importing crude oil from Venezuela. But there are certain problems with the Venezuelan crude oil. Let's just understand what is the problem. So it is bottom heavy, it is also having high viscosity, and it has a high acidic number also. Let's understand what do I mean by these 3 words. High viscosity means that it has huge resistance to flow. So when an oil has resistance to flow, ultimately it would be difficult for us to use it in the vehicles. For that, for effectively using it in the vehicles, you need to flow bend it with the lighter versions of the crude. Okay, and that involves cost. Then heavy, it is heavy because it is thicker and denser than the lighter crude oil grades, and it can be processed only by a very handful number of Indian refineries like the Reliance. So not all the refineries have the potential to refine this Venezuelan crude oil because of this high viscosity. Then high acidic number basically tells us that what is the chemical mix existing naturally in the oil, which could result in corrosion also. Okay, so Venezuelan crude oil contain high metal and nitrogen content. And why it is said to be heavy sour crude, why it is not sweet crude? Because it has a high sulfur content. Now, in this particular backdrop, SBI did a research and it pointed out that India can reduce its fuel bill by $3 billion if we move towards the Venezuelan crude oil. Certain prelim facts with respect to Venezuela. So, it is situated in the South America here. Bordering countries are Guyana, Brazil, Colombia. Maritime boundary is shared with Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Here you can see Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. And its capital is Caracas, and it has huge reserves of oil. Gas reserves also are available here, and we also have reserves of coal, iron ore, bauxite and gold. Important water bodies are Orinoco River, Rio Negro and Lake Maracaibo. And it also have the world's highest waterfall, that is the Angel's Fall, which is located in the Guyana Highlands. That's all with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, in the backdrop of Kumbh Mela, the sale of raw meat has been banned, and all the meat shops have been relocated to the city outskirts. This particular topic is relevant from the art and culture segment of our prelim syllabus. Now, let's just understand the history of Kumbh Mela. So, we have a story which is provided in the Hindu mythology, which state that according to Samudra Manthan, churning of the ocean, the story in the Hindu ancient script tells us that there was a fight between the gods and the demons over the Amrit. And some drops of this Amrit fell at 4 locations, that is Prayagraj, which is situated at the confluence of Ganga, Yamuna and mythical invisible Saraswati river, at Haridwar, which is situated at the bank of Ganga, Ujjain, which is situated at the bank of river Shipra, and Nasik, which is situated at the bank of river Godavari, where the Kumbh Mela is now held. Kumbh Mela is held at all these 4 places. And Kumbh Mela is organized in Prayagraj after 144 years. Historically, the Kumbh Mela has been referred since ancient times, and this was done during the time of Mauryan as well as Gupta periods as well. And it also enjoyed royal patronage from Mughals also, and this was something which was documented by the colonial administrators also, like James Princip. And it has got the UNESCO Intangible Heritage tag way back in 2017 because of it fostering unity, spirituality and cultural exchange among millions worldwide. The timing of each Kumbh Mela is determined by the astrological position of Sun, Moon and Jupiter. Different types of Kumbh are there. Kumbh Mela is celebrated 4 times over a course of 12 years. At Haridwar and Prayagraj, Ardh Kumbh Mela is organized every 6th year. Kumbh Mela is celebrated at Prayag every 144 years. And Magh Kumbh is celebrated every year in the month of Magh, that is January, February in Prayagraj. And the Kumbh of 2019 created 3 Guinness World Record because of the largest traffic and crowd management plan that we have, biggest painting exercise of public site under the Paint My City scheme, and biggest sanitation and waste disposal mechanism that we have put in place. Effective management was done. That's all that we need to know in today's Analyst. Quiz would be coming right up next, so don't forget to practice the quiz and check your knowledge. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a great day, all of you.